Welcome to Mafia Stories. Where are you listening from? Comment below and let the story begin. She's not worth much, Caruso, but she'll cover the rest of my bet. Grant Holloway's words landed harder than the stack of poker chips he pushed across the green felt. Abigail Bennett stood 3 feet from the table, holding a payroll folder against her chest, while 12 men in tailored suits turned to look at her. For one awful second, nobody spoke. Then someone near the bar gave a short laugh. Abigail felt heat climb into her cheeks. She had worked at Holloway Crown Casino for nearly 4 years, long enough to know that wealthy men could make cruelty sound like a joke and expect everyone else to smile. She did not smile. Neither did Vincent Caruso. He sat across from Grant beneath the low amber lights of the private poker room, broad shoulders filling a black dress shirt, tattooed forearms resting beside nearly $2 million in chips. Dark ink disappeared beneath his cuffs and climbed the side of his neck, with one small mark near his cheekbone. He looked less like a man trying to impress a room and more like someone who had never needed to. Grant tapped the folder in Abigail's hands. Family debt agreement. Employment guarantee. Everything legal enough to make the lawyers sleep at night. Abigail swallowed. That agreement had followed her family for 6 years, beginning with medical bills her father could not pay and growing through fees she never understood. Every paycheck she earned seemed to make the balance smaller for a month, then somehow larger again. She had stopped asking questions because questions at Holloway Crown had a way of costing people their jobs. Vincent's eyes moved from Grant to Abigail. Not over her body. Not toward the men watching. Straight to her face. "Did you agree to this?" he asked. His voice was quiet, almost conversational. That somehow made the room listen harder. Grant leaned back. "Come on. Don't turn sentimental on me now." Abigail looked at the contract, then at Vincent. She should have stayed silent. Silence had paid her rent. Silence had kept her mother from worrying. Silence had become almost comfortable. But humiliation had a strange way of burning through fear. "Would it matter?" she asked. Grant's smile tightened. Vincent did not answer right away. His thumb rested against the edge of a poker chip, motionless. Abigail noticed his eyes sharpen, not with anger exactly, but with attention, the kind that made people reconsider what they had just said. Grant spread his hands. "She's a payroll clerk. Clumsy, quiet, always dropping something. Trust me, you're not winning a prize." Abigail glanced at the glass of water beside him. For one reckless second, she imagined accidentally dropping that too, preferably in his lap. The thought almost made her smile. Vincent caught the flicker in her expression. Something changed at the corner of his mouth, gone before she could be sure it had happened. Then Grant pushed the contract onto the table beside his remaining chips. "I'm short 200 grand. The agreement covers it. Unless the great Vincent Caruso is suddenly afraid of a bad investment." Several men shifted in their chairs. Abigail heard the soft hum of the ceiling vents, the distant chime of slot machines beyond the private doors, and her own heartbeat beating far too loudly. Vincent finally looked down at his cards. Grant watched him carefully. Too carefully. Abigail noticed it then. Grant was not nervous. A man about to lose everything should have been sweating. Grant looked almost pleased. Vincent gathered every chip in front of him with both hands. The room seemed to tighten around the sound as he pushed the entire stack toward the center. Grant's smile disappeared. Abigail stopped breathing. Vincent raised his eyes to hers for one brief moment, then turned back to the table. "All in." Grant stared at him, and beneath the surprise, Abigail saw something colder flicker across his face. Not fear. Satisfaction. As if this was exactly what he had wanted. The dealer turned over the final card, and every sound in the private room seemed to shrink beneath the weight of it. Vincent Caruso had won. Grant Holloway stared at the table for several seconds before releasing a soft breath through his nose. The men around them shifted uneasily, waiting for anger, an argument, anything. Grant only leaned back in his chair and gave Abigail a thin smile. "Well," he said, "looks like you are his problem now." Abigail hated how easily the words came out of him. She tightened her grip on the payroll folder until the edge pressed into her palm. Vincent gathered neither the chips nor the contract. Instead, he reached for the papers Grant had placed beside the pot and read the first page without changing his posture. Abigail watched his eyes move slowly across the legal language. Grant poured himself another drink. "Do not waste your time. My attorneys built that agreement carefully." Vincent turned one page, then another. I am sure they did. His tone carried no admiration. Abigail noticed something she had missed before. Grant kept glancing toward the security camera near the ceiling. Not often enough to be obvious, but often enough that she began counting. Once, twice, 3 times. Vincent stopped reading. This says the debt transfers with the employment obligation. Exactly. Grant smiled again. She works until the balance is satisfied. Simple. Vincent lifted his gaze. No. Debt is transferable. A person is not. The room became still. Grant gave a quiet laugh. You knew what was on the table. Vincent tore the signature page cleanly down the middle. Abigail blinked. Before anyone could react, he tore it again, then placed the pieces beside Grant's glass. I won the debt, Vincent said. Not the woman. Abigail stared at him. For years, every discussion about that agreement had happened around her, never with her. Lawyers had explained what she owed. Managers had explained what she could not do. Grant had explained why leaving was impossible. Vincent had just destroyed the part everyone treated as permanent, and he had done it without asking for gratitude. You can walk out, he told her. Tonight. Abigail opened her mouth, but nothing came. Grant studied Vincent with an expression that was almost amused. Very noble. Vincent rose from the table. At 6 feet 3 inches, he seemed even larger standing, yet his movements remained measured. Do not confuse basic decency with nobility. One of Grant's guests looked down quickly, suddenly fascinated by his cards. Abigail felt an unexpected laugh, trying to escape, and swallowed it. Before Grant noticed, Vincent turned toward her. Do you have a car? Yes. Where? Employee garage. Level 3. He looked toward one of the men near the door. Have someone check it before she leaves. Abigail frowned. I can check my own car. Vincent glanced at her. Do you know what to look for? Mostly parking tickets and empty coffee cups. His mouth nearly moved into a smile. Nearly. 10 minutes later, they stood beside her aging blue sedan beneath fluorescent garage lights. One of Vincent's security men crouched beside the front wheel, then slowly stood. She is not driving this. Abigail's stomach tightened. Why? The man looked at Vincent rather than answering her. Vincent stepped closer to the car, studying something beneath the hood. Because someone tampered with it. Abigail turned toward the casino entrance. Through the glass doors above the ramp, Grant Holloway was visible on the mezzanine. He was not watching the car. He was watching Vincent. Then Grant looked directly toward the security camera and smiled. Abigail felt the last warmth leave her face. Vincent followed her stare. What is it? She lowered her voice. He wanted you to win. He wanted you to win. Abigail heard her own words and wished she could pull them back, but Vincent Caruso had already turned toward her. The garage lights washed the color from his face, making the dark ink along his neck stand out against his skin. Why? He asked. Abigail looked toward the mezzanine again. Grant was gone. I do not know. Not yet. Vincent studied her for a moment, then motioned toward his security man. Bring me the deck from the private table. Abigail folded her arms. You think the cards were fixed? I think Holloway does very little by accident. 5 minutes later, a casino employee arrived carrying the sealed deck in a clear evidence pouch. Vincent handed it to Abigail instead of opening it himself. You noticed something upstairs. It was not a question. She hesitated, then broke the seal and spread the cards across the hood of a black SUV. Her fingers moved carefully over the glossy surfaces. Years of working around casino inventory had taught her what new cards should feel like. Smooth edges, clean corners, no scratches, no imperfections. She reached the Queen of Hearts and stopped. Near the upper edge was a tiny pinprick, almost invisible beneath the overhead light. Abigail tilted it. There. Vincent leaned closer without touching her. A mark, small enough that most people would never see it. She checked several more cards. The King of Clubs carried a second mark. The 10 of Diamonds had 2. Her pulse quickened. These are coded. Vincent looked toward the casino elevators. Meaning Grant knew the hands. Meaning he could have controlled the entire game if he knew the pattern. She placed the queen back on the hood. And if he controlled the game, he did not lose me. The words tasted bitter. He placed me exactly where he wanted me. Vincent's jaw tightened. Why would he want you with me? Abigail gave a nervous little laugh. Maybe he heard about my charming personality. Vincent glanced at her. You insult men who just erased your debt? Only the intimidating ones. For the first time, she saw unmistakable amusement cross his face. It vanished when his phone rang. He answered, listened, then looked at Abigail. Something in his posture changed. Your address. Her humor disappeared. Why? My people checked the information Holloway kept in your employment file. Someone entered your apartment less than 20 minutes ago. Abigail stared at him. Entered how? The building manager found your door open. Her hands went cold. My mother? You live alone. Yes. She took a breath that did nothing to steady her. I need to go there. You are not going alone. I did not ask for permission. Good. I was not giving it. 30 minutes later, Abigail stood outside her second-floor apartment in a quiet brick building on Chicago's northwest side. Nothing looked dramatically destroyed. That somehow made it worse. The lamp remained upright. Her thrift store couch cushions were untouched. The jar of emergency cash inside the kitchen cabinet was still there. Vincent walked through the rooms without disturbing anything while Abigail hurried toward the small desk beside her bedroom window. The empty space beneath it stopped. Her cold. No. Vincent came up behind her. What is missing? She crouched and checked the cables as if the computer might somehow reappear. My laptop. Anything else? Abigail opened the desk drawer. Her passport remained. An old watch was untouched. Even the envelope containing several $100s was still beneath a stack of utility bills. She slowly stood. Whoever had entered had wanted one thing. Vincent watched her face rather than the empty desk. Abigail. She could no longer pretend this was only about a crooked poker game. There were files on it. What kind of files? She looked toward the hallway, then back at him. Her throat tightened. For almost 2 years, she had protected the answer by acting harmless, forgettable, and occasionally incompetent. Tonight, somebody had finally stopped believing the act. Vincent stepped closer, leaving enough space for her to move away if she wanted. What was on that computer? Abigail met his eyes, and this time she could not find a joke. Something Grant Holloway would do almost anything to keep buried. Abigail closed the apartment door and turned the deadbolt even though Vincent had already placed 2 men in the hallway. Her hands needed something to do. Anything was better than standing still beneath his questions. The files are payroll records, she said. Vincent remained near the kitchen counter, giving her the room instead of filling it. That does not explain why somebody wanted your computer. Abigail opened a cabinet, reached automatically for a coffee mug, then remembered it was nearly 2 in the morning. She put it back. About 2 years ago, I noticed an employee named Marcus Hill was having $300 deducted from every paycheck for a company loan. The strange part was that his balance kept increasing. Vincent said nothing. That patience made lying harder. Abigail walked to the small dining table and pulled out a chair. I checked another account. Same thing. Then another. Different people, same pattern. Housekeepers, kitchen workers, drivers, security guards. People who needed money badly enough to sign whatever was placed in front of them. Like your family did, Vincent said. Abigail looked at him. Yes. The word came quieter than she intended. She opened a drawer beneath the table and removed a cheap flash drive taped behind an old takeout menu. Vincent noticed it, but made no move toward her. You kept another copy. I am clumsy, not stupid. A brief warmth touched his eyes. I am beginning to understand the difference. Abigail almost smiled, then inserted the drive into an older tablet she kept for recipes and streaming movies. Rows of numbers appeared across the screen. The loans were designed so the fees grew faster than most employees could pay them. Miss one payment, and the interest jumped. Leave your job, and the entire balance became due. People thought they were working off debt, but the system was built to keep them trapped. Vincent stepped closer to the table. Holloway knew you found this. Not at first. Abigail scrolled through folders labeled with ordinary names. Grocery lists, tax forms, vacation photos. Hidden among them were spreadsheets she had copied after late shifts. I started sending pieces of the records to an independent labor attorney using the name Bluebird. Vincent's gaze lifted from the screen. Bluebird. Abigail rubbed her thumb along the edge of the tablet. It sounded better than terrified payroll clerk number 7. How many people know who Bluebird is? Until tonight, nobody. Vincent looked toward the missing space where her laptop had been. Holloway figured it out. Maybe. Or someone working around him did. She opened another file. Hundreds of transactions appeared, each connected to shell companies and private lenders. Vincent leaned over just enough to read without crowding her. Abigail noticed how carefully he kept his hands away from the device. as though acknowledging that the information belonged to her. "I did not collect this to destroy anybody," she said. "I wanted proof strong enough that these people could walk away without losing everything." Vincent's attention stayed on the screen. "You could have walked away yourself." Abigail gave him a tired look. "And left everyone else behind?" His eyes moved to hers. Something passed between them that neither named. Then, Abigail opened the oldest transaction folder. Her finger stopped above the trackpad. "That cannot be right." Vincent straightened. "What?" She enlarged the document. The records were nearly 8 years old, long before she had worked at the casino. One corporation had authorized the original financing structure behind Holloway's employee debt program. Abigail read the name once, then again, hoping exhaustion had rearranged the letters. It had not. She slowly turned the tablet toward Vincent. For the first time since meeting him, the control in his face cracked. At the bottom of the document was a signature beneath the company name Caruso Holdings. The signature belonged to Anthony Caruso, Vincent's father. Vincent did not touch the tablet. For several seconds, he simply stared at his father's signature while Abigail watched a muscle tighten near his jaw. "You knew about this company?" she asked. "I knew the name." His voice had lost its earlier ease. "I did not know what it financed." Abigail searched his face for defensiveness and found none. That unsettled her more than an excuse would have. Vincent reached into his pocket, removed his phone, then stopped before making the call. "Your apartment is compromised. I have a secure house 15 minutes from here." Abigail folded her arms. "Is that an invitation or an order?" His eyes met hers. "An invitation. And if I say no? I put security outside this building and leave." She had expected resistance. Instead, he handed the choice back so easily that she almost distrusted it. Abigail glanced toward the empty space where her laptop had been, then at the flash drive beside the tablet. "Fine, but I pick my own room. There are 6. Good. I would hate to fight a mafia boss over closet space." Something softened briefly around his eyes. "You would probably win." The house turned out to be a quiet brick property near the lake, comfortable rather than flashy, with plain furniture and a kitchen that looked almost aggressively normal. Vincent gave her a key before showing her upstairs. No rules. No warning about locked doors. No speech about gratitude. Just a key placed in her palm. By morning, Abigail had slept less than 3 hours and decided cooking breakfast would make her feel useful. 10 minutes later, smoke curled from the toaster. An alarm shrieked overhead. 3 security men rushed into the kitchen while Abigail stood holding a blackened slice of bread with kitchen tongs. Vincent entered last, sleeves rolled to his elbows, tattoos visible along both arms. He looked from the men to Abigail, then to the toast. "False alarm," she said. "Unless carbohydrates have declared war." One of the guards coughed into his hand to hide a laugh. Vincent crossed the room, switched off the alarm, and examined the toast as if it were evidence. "This may be the first assassination attempt I believe was accidental." Abigail stared at him. Then she laughed before she could stop herself. The sound felt strange after the night they had survived. Vincent poured 2 cups of coffee and placed one near her without asking how she took it. "Cream, no sugar." "Exactly right." She noticed. She did not mention it. They returned to the tablet at the kitchen island. Vincent opened an older corporate directory connected to Caruso Holdings while Abigail compared names against her payroll files. "If your father signed this," she said carefully, "that does not automatically mean he understood how Holloway used it later." Vincent scrolled without looking at her. "You do not have to protect me from facts." "I am not. I just dislike conclusions that arrive before evidence." His hand paused over the screen. "That is an unusual quality. I also burn toast. Nobody is perfect." This time, his smile stayed long enough for her to see it. Then the document loaded. Vincent's attention sharpened. Abigail leaned closer, reading a list of consultants employed by Caruso Holdings 8 years earlier. One name appeared directly beneath Anthony Caruso's office. She forgot about the coffee in her hand. Forgot about the burnt smell still hanging in the kitchen. Vincent slowly turned the tablet toward her. Abigail. Her father's name was there in plain black letters. Daniel Bennett, Senior Financial Auditor, reporting directly to Anthony Caruso. And beside his name was a final notation dated 3 days before the accident that had killed him. Internal investigation opened. Abigail read the notation twice before setting her coffee down with both hands. My father never told me he worked for your family. Vincent stayed beside the kitchen island, his attention fixed on the screen. Mine never mentioned Daniel Bennett. Abigail pulled the tablet closer. The corporate directory contained no hidden codes, no mysterious messages, only ordinary records that suddenly felt personal. Daniel had been assigned to review employee lending programs connected to Caruso Holdings. 3 days after the investigation opened, his name disappeared from every active file. There has to be more, Abigail said. Vincent reached for his phone. There is. 2 hours later, they entered a private records office on the second floor of an old Caruso-owned building near downtown Chicago. The room smelled faintly of paper and furniture polish. Metal cabinets covered one wall. Vincent unlocked a drawer marked with his father's administration and stepped back. You should choose what gets opened. Abigail glanced at him. You really do enjoy making me responsible for uncomfortable decisions. I have noticed you make them anyway. That sounded dangerously close to a compliment. Do not get used to it. She smiled despite herself and pulled the drawer open. They found Daniel Bennett's audit within 20 minutes. No secret journal. No hidden recording. Just 68 pages of financial notes, signed statements, and internal complaints from workers whose debts had grown despite years of payments. Abigail sat at a long wooden table while Vincent stood across from her, reading a letter written by her father. Daniel had warned Anthony Caruso that the lending program could become abusive if outside operators controlled fees and penalties. He had asked Anthony to suspend the contracts until an independent review was completed. Abigail found Anthony's response clipped behind it. Her eyes slowed as she read. Anthony agreed that Daniel's concerns were valid. He also refused to shut the program down. Ending it immediately, he wrote, would break agreements with several powerful business partners and threaten hundreds of legitimate jobs. He promised reforms later. Those reforms never came. Abigail looked up. Vincent had removed his watch and placed it beside the file. His fingertips pressed against the table's edge. He knew, Vincent said. Abigail heard no defense in his voice. He knew something was wrong and chose stability. Vincent looked toward the window. My father used that word whenever he wanted something ugly to sound necessary. Abigail studied him. That does not mean he wanted my father hurt. Vincent turned back. No, it means Daniel asked for protection and my father decided protecting the business mattered more. The space between them changed. Abigail could have blamed him. Part of her wanted somewhere easy to place 8 years of unanswered questions. Instead, she slid Anthony's letter across the table. You did not write this. Vincent's hand stopped beside hers. You should be angrier. I am. Her fingers curled against the wood. I just prefer being angry at the right person. For a moment, neither moved. Her hand rested inches from his. Vincent slowly shifted his closer, stopping before their fingers touched. He let the remaining distance belong to her. Abigail looked at his hand, then at him, and moved her own the final inch. Their fingertips met lightly. No promise. No explanation. Just warmth after a morning filled with old mistakes. Vincent's phone rang. He withdrew his hand and checked the screen. His expression sharpened. Holloway. Abigail straightened. Answer it. Vincent put the call on speaker. Grant's voice came through smooth and almost friendly. I assume you found Daniel Bennett's audit by now. Abigail's breath caught. Vincent's eyes lifted to hers. Grant continued before either could speak. Good. Then asked Vincent what Anthony Caruso did after Daniel begged him for help. What did he do? Abigail asked. Grant's voice stayed level through the speaker. Anthony refused Daniel's request for protection and reassigned him to an outside review office. 3 days later, Daniel was gone, and the investigation disappeared with him. Vincent's fingers curled against the edge of the table. You are leaving something out. Grant gave a dry chuckle. Of course I am. So did your father. The call ended. Abigail stared at the dark screen. Was he telling the truth? Vincent reached for another folder, moving with a controlled precision that felt different now. We verify before we believe. They searched the archive for another hour and found the reassignment order. Anthony had signed it. Daniel Bennett had been moved away from Caruso headquarters after asking for formal protection. Abigail read the date and felt the room narrow around her. Vincent stood beside the window, shoulders rigid beneath his shirt. I am sorry, he said. 2 words. No excuse attached. Abigail looked at him. You did not make that decision. I inherited everything that came after it. Then decide what comes after you. His eyes shifted toward her. Before he could answer, his phone buzzed. One of his security men spoke quickly from downstairs. Vincent listened, then slipped the phone into his pocket. "We need to leave." "Why?" "There is a vehicle outside that has passed this building 4 times in 20 minutes. Abigail glanced toward the window. "Maybe they are lost." Vincent raised an eyebrow. "Around the same block?" Chicago parking can break a person. That almost earned a smile, but he was already gathering the audit files. They left through a private garage and drove toward another Caruso property several miles away. Halfway there, Vincent's driver pulled beneath the lights of a 24-hour gas station and stepped out. A minute later, he returned holding a small magnetic device in a plastic bag. "Tracker," he said. Abigail's stomach tightened. Vincent studied it, then made one phone call. No raised voice. No threats. Just 3 questions asked quietly. When he finished, he looked toward Abigail. "We change cars." The second safe location was a modest apartment above a closed bakery in Lincoln Park. Abigail sat at the kitchen counter while Vincent opened an old metal first aid box. A sharp edge caught the side of his hand as the lid stuck. He pulled back with a quiet hiss. Abigail stared at the small cut. "Please tell me Chicago's most intimidating man was not defeated by a first aid kit." It was. Poorly designed. Of course. Blame engineering. She took the box from him and found a bandage. Vincent held out his hand, then paused. "You do not have to." Abigail looked at him. "You trust me with financial evidence that could ruin half your family business. But a bandage is where we draw the line." A faint trace of amusement crossed his face. She cleaned the cut, careful around the dark ink covering his knuckles and wrist. Her fingers trembled once, and the scissors slipped onto the counter. "Excellent," she muttered. "I am exactly who you want in a medical emergency. I will remember that." "Good. Also, you are getting blood on a perfectly innocent paper towel." Vincent actually laughed, low and brief, and the sound surprised them both. Abigail finished the bandage and let go slowly. Their hands remained close for a second longer than necessary. Then Vincent's phone lit up. He read the message, and every hint of humor disappeared. They traced the tracker. Abigail straightened. "To Holloway?" Vincent turned the screen toward her. "No. The registration number belonged to a security division inside Caruso Holdings. Someone in Vincent's own organization had been following them." Vincent read the registration twice, then called the head of Caruso Security and asked for a complete access log. 10 minutes later, one name appeared beside the tracking request. Martin Vale, a regional operations director who had worked under Anthony Caruso for more than 15 years. Abigail watched Vincent place the phone face down on the counter. "You know him?" "I thought I did." "That sounds worse." "It usually is." Instead of ordering anyone to find Vale, Vincent sent a single message to Grant Holloway. Abigail raised an eyebrow. "You are inviting the man who gambled my employment contract into this?" "I am asking him one question. Somehow that does not make me feel better." Grant chose the meeting place himself, a private dining room inside a hotel near the Chicago River. By late afternoon, Abigail sat beside Vincent at a table set for 3. Grant arrived alone. No smile this time. No performance. He removed his coat, sat across from them, and looked directly at Abigail. "So you finally found the Caruso tracker." Vincent did not move. "You knew?" "I suspected." Abigail leaned forward, then started explaining. Grant studied her for a moment. 2 months ago, someone began asking questions about Bluebird inside my casino. Not the kind of questions an employer asks. They wanted schedules, addresses, family contacts. Abigail felt her fingers tighten around the edge of her napkin. Grant continued, "I did not know Bluebird was you until 3 weeks ago. And your solution was to put me in a poker game? My solution was to move you somewhere the people searching for you would hesitate to follow." Vincent's stare hardened. "You could have warned me. And you would have believed me?" Grant asked. Vincent gave no answer. Grant turned back to Abigail. "I marked the deck. I controlled the hand. I made sure Vincent won." Abigail stared at him. The humiliation at the table suddenly changed shape. It did not hurt less, but now she understood the strange calm in Grant's face. "You called me worthless." Grant's gaze dropped for the first time. "Because if the room believed you mattered, the wrong people would have understood why I was handing you to Caruso." Abigail let out a quiet breath. "You have a very unusual definition of protection. I never claimed to be good at kindness." Something in his voice shifted. Vincent noticed it too. "Why protect her at all?" Grant looked toward the river beyond the window. My wife, Elena, found the same lending system years before Abigail did. She tried to help several employees leave it. Powerful people pushed back. She died before she could finish what she started. No details followed. None were needed. Grant folded his hands. I spent years believing I could destroy the system by controlling it first. That was my mistake. Abigail searched his face. And now you want my files? Yes. To help people? To tear every participating company apart at once. Vincent's voice stayed quiet, including companies with innocent employees. Grant met his eyes. Systems built on fear do not come down cleanly. Abigail shook her head. Then you are not saving anyone. You are choosing who gets hurt. Grant accepted the words without flinching. Maybe, but I am done pretending there is a painless option. He slid a sealed envelope across the table. Vincent opened it. Inside was a list of names. Abigail recognized several immediately. Workers whose records she had copied. People who had trusted nobody but Bluebird. Grant spoke before she could ask. The group using Caruso Security has that list too. Give me the complete Bluebird archive, and I can keep those names buried. Refuse, and by tomorrow morning every employer, lender, and investigator tied to this system will know exactly who helped you. Abigail looked at Vincent. He was already looking at her, not the envelope. Grant rose from his chair. You have until midnight. Then he left them with the list between them and a choice that could protect the truth or the people who had trusted Abigail with it. By 10:30 that night, Vincent had already made his decision. Abigail realized it when she found him alone in the apartment kitchen with a legal pad, 3 phones, and a list of Caruso properties arranged beside Grant's envelope. He had removed his jacket, and the sleeves of his white shirt were pushed above his tattooed forearms. What are you doing? She asked. Vincent covered nothing. Moving assets. Abigail picked up the nearest page. 2 warehouses, a shipping contract, and a distribution property were marked for transfer. To Grant. To people outside the lending network. Why? Because if I cut these businesses away from Caruso Holdings tonight, Martinvale loses access to several accounts connected to the names on that list. Abigail stared at the numbers beside each property. You are giving up millions of dollars. Money can be replaced. That is not the point. Vincent lifted his eyes. It is exactly the point. She set the page down harder than she meant to. You do not get to ruin your life for me. His face changed slightly, not anger, but something more personal. This is not only about you. Do not hide behind that. Abigail stepped closer. You are making every decision before I even know there is a decision to make. Vincent rested both palms against the counter. The people on that list need protection now. Then we protect them together. And if together puts you in more danger? You ask me. Her voice softened, which somehow made the words stronger. You do not put me behind a locked door and call it kindness. Vincent looked away toward the dark window. For once, he seemed to have no prepared answer. Abigail watched his shoulders lower a fraction. I spent most of my life watching my father make choices for everyone around him, he said. He called it responsibility. And you hated it. I thought I did. She moved beside him. Then be different. His gaze returned to her. You make that sound simple. It is not. I am the woman who nearly started a security emergency with toast. That drew the smallest laugh from him. Abigail smiled. But complicated does not mean impossible. Vincent looked at her for a long moment, then slid the legal pad across the counter. All right. Together. The words settled between them with more weight than she expected. They spent the next hour calling attorneys, separating legitimate employees from compromised companies, and arranging temporary protection for the people whose names Grant held. Vincent never took over her side of the work. When she spoke, he listened. When she disagreed, he adjusted. Near midnight, Abigail reached for the same folder he did. Their hands touched. Neither pulled away immediately. You are staring, she said, trying to sound lighter than she felt. So are you. I was here first. A quiet smile appeared on his face. Then he raised his free hand and stopped before touching her cheek. May I? Abigail answered by leaning closer. The kiss was brief, gentle, and almost careful enough to break her heart. When they separated, Vincent rested his forehead lightly against hers for 1 second before stepping back. No promises followed. They did not need them yet. Later, after the apartment grew quiet, Abigail stood alone beside the kitchen table. Vincent had gone to sleep upstairs. The Bluebird files glowed on her tablet. His cooperation tonight had changed something between them. It had also made the truth harder, because buried inside those records were transactions tied not only to Holloway and Vale, but to Caruso businesses Vincent was trying to save. Abigail opened a secure legal portal she had prepared months ago. 3 independent attorneys, 1 federal labor office. For encrypted copies, her finger hovered above the final command. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked. Abigail closed her eyes. Then she sent everything. Morning came gray over Chicago, and Vincent knew before Abigail said a word. One of the phones on the kitchen counter lit with a message from his attorney, followed by another, then a third. Federal labor investigators had received documents tied to Caruso Holdings, so had 2 independent law firms. Vincent read the first message, then placed the phone beside his untouched coffee. Abigail stood near the window with both hands wrapped around a mug she had forgotten to drink from. "You sent the files," he said. She did not pretend otherwise. "Yes. All of them. Everything I could verify." His eyes moved toward her. "Including my companies. Including your companies." Vincent walked to the counter and rested his fingertips against the stone. No shouting. No accusation. Somehow, Abigail wished he would raise his voice. Anger would have been easier than the distance growing across 6 feet of kitchen floor. "When?" he asked. "Last night. After we agreed to work together." Abigail swallowed. "Yes." He looked down for a moment. "Did you ever plan to tell me?" The truth hurt before she spoke it. "No." Vincent's hand tightened once around the edge of the counter, then released. Abigail stepped closer. "If I warned you, you would have tried to protect your employees, your family, your businesses. Maybe for good reasons. But I could not let the truth depend on whether the man I care about deserved an exception." His gaze lifted sharply at those last words. She had not meant to say them that way. Now they hung between them, too honest to take back. "You think I would have buried it?" he asked. "I think you would have wanted time. And you decided I could not be trusted with it." Abigail blinked against the sting behind her eyes. "I decided nobody should own it. Not Grant. Not you. Not me." Vincent turned toward the window. The city moved below them, indifferent and busy. "My father told himself he needed more time too," he said quietly. Abigail said nothing. He waited until protecting the business mattered more than protecting people. Vincent faced her again. The hurt in his eyes was controlled, but it was there. "You were afraid I might become him. I was afraid I might help you become him." That landed differently. Vincent drew a slow breath. Abigail set her mug down. "If you want me gone, I will leave. I do not want you gone." His answer came too quickly, and both of them felt it. He looked away for half a second before continuing. "But wanting you here cannot become another way of controlling what you choose." Abigail's throat tightened. Vincent picked up her coat from the chair and held it out to her. "The investigators will contact you soon. My attorneys will cooperate. The people on Grant's list still need protection, and I will keep providing it whether you stay or not." She took the coat. Their fingers brushed, but this time neither reached back. "Vincent," he met her eyes. "I meant what I said last night." "So did I. That was the worst part." Abigail left before she could change her mind. Outside, the morning air felt colder than it should have. She walked half a block toward the corner, wondering whether she had just destroyed the first good thing she had allowed herself to want in years. A black sedan waited at the curb, the rear window lowered. Grant Holloway sat inside, looking more tired than triumphant. "Get in, Abigail." She stopped. "Absolutely not." Grant held up his phone. On the screen was a photograph of the names from the protected list. "Then you should know Martin Vale has them too, and he is moving faster than Vincent thinks." Abigail's hand tightened around her coat. Grant opened the door from inside. "You sent the evidence. Good. Now come with me if you want those people to stay hidden long enough for it to matter." Abigail got into Grant Holloway's car because the names on his phone mattered more than her fear of making another mistake. Grant said almost nothing during the drive. Chicago slid past the windows in cold morning light until the sedan turned beneath the familiar gold sign of Holloway Crown Casino. Abigail stared at him. "You brought me back here. There is one place Martin Vale still believes I control completely. The poker room." Grant opened his door. Exactly. 20 minutes later, Abigail stood beside the same green felt table where her life had changed less than 48 hours earlier. This time there was no audience. No laughter. Only Grant, Abigail, and a laptop displaying the protected names. "Vale built a release system," Grant said. "If he loses access to certain Caruso accounts, These identities go to every lender and employer connected to the network. Abigail studied the screen. Then disable it. I cannot. That is incredibly inconvenient. Grant almost smiled. You sound less frightened than you did 2 nights ago. I have had a stressful week. The private doors opened. Vincent entered alone. No security team followed him. His dark coat hung open over a plain black shirt, and his attention went directly to Abigail. He checked her face, her hands, the distance between her and Grant. Only after he seemed satisfied did he look at the computer. She came willingly, Grant said. Abigail lifted a hand. Reluctantly. There is a difference. Vincent's eyes stayed on her another second before turning to Grant. What do you want? Grant placed a folder on the table. Control of the Caruso properties tied to the lending network. You transfer them to an independent trust today. Vale loses the financial leverage, keeping his people loyal. I take responsibility for dismantling what remains. Vincent opened the folder. And the names. Protected. Your word. For whatever that is worth. Abigail stepped toward the table. Vincent, do not sign anything because I am standing here. He looked at her. I am not. Good. I am signing because those people should never have been collateral in the first place. Grant's expression shifted. You understand what you are giving up? Vincent removed a pen from inside the folder. Better than my father did. Abigail's breath caught. There was no grand speech, no attempt to appear heroic. Vincent simply read each page, corrected 2 clauses, and signed where necessary. Millions of dollars in property changed hands beneath the same lights where Grant had once placed Abigail's contract on the table. Grant watched the final signature appear. Anthony would never have done that. Vincent closed the pen. I know. Something weary crossed Grant's face. For the first time, Abigail saw the man beneath the casino owner, someone who had spent years trying to defeat an old system without realizing how much it had shaped him. Grant turned the laptop around. Vale's access will be cut within the hour. Abigail examined the screen. Then she noticed a timestamp beside the release program. Her stomach tightened. The system had been modified that morning after her files were sent. Grant. He looked at her. What? This is not Vale's original program. Vincent came around the table. Abigail enlarged the audit log. The newest command had not come from Caruso Security. It came from a Holloway Crown Administrator account. Grant's face lost color. That is impossible. Abigail looked from him to Vincent, then back at the screen. Suddenly, the entire argument about ownership, leverage, and sacrifice felt smaller than the truth sitting in front of them. You are both still playing the wrong game. Abigail stared at the administrator code until the pieces finally aligned. Grant, this release was created from your office. Grant stepped closer to the laptop. I did not create it. Maybe not with your own hands. She opened the access history and found a secondary credential linked to his executive account. But someone used authority that only existed because you built the system this way. Vincent watched her carefully. Can it still expose the names? Abigail shook her head. Not the way Grant thinks. Both men looked at her. She pulled her tablet from her bag and opened the Bluebird security settings. I never kept one master file that someone could steal, trade, or destroy. The witness identities were separated from the financial records months ago. The attorneys received the evidence, but the protected names went into a sealed legal hold. Grant frowned. Then what is this program? A bluff. Abigail turned the laptop toward him. It threatens to release information it does not actually possess. Grant looked at the screen, then slowly sat down. Vale knew I would believe it. Because you believe information only matters if one person controls it. Her voice stayed gentle, but the words landed. Vincent thought the same thing at first. So did I. Vincent's gaze shifted toward her. Abigail opened another page. There is more. When someone stole my laptop, I assumed they had everything. They did not. I designed Bluebird so no single device held enough to identify the workers. If my account stayed inactive too long, encrypted copies went automatically to the attorneys I had already chosen. Grant stared at her. You built a deadman system? I prefer overly anxious payroll clerk system. Vincent's mouth almost curved despite the tension. More accurate. Abigail gave him a quick look. Thank you. Grant leaned back, the certainty leaving his posture. Then the transfer I demanded was unnecessary. Vincent closed the folder containing the signed property documents. No, Grant looked at him. No. The pressure was false. The problem was not. Vincent tapped the list of companies. Those businesses were tied to contracts that should never have existed. The trust stays. Grant studied him for several seconds. You would still give them up? I already did. Abigail watched something shift in Grant's face. Not defeat exactly. Recognition. He had spent years assuming powerful men changed only when forced. Vincent had just chosen the cost after learning he did not have to pay it. Grant looked at Abigail next. You planned farther ahead than either of us. Mostly because I panicked professionally. That is not what I would call it. You also once called me worthless, so your judgment has room for improvement. Grant lowered his eyes, and for the first time, he looked ashamed. You deserved better than that. Abigail did not rush to forgive him. Yes, I did. The words came easier than she expected. Vincent looked at her with quiet pride, and this time she did not look away. A knock sounded at the private doors. One of Grant's managers entered, pale and breathless. There are federal investigators downstairs. Labor Division, financial crimes, and state attorneys. They have warrants for records. Grant closed his eyes briefly. So it begins. Vincent reached for his coat. Abigail caught his wrist before he could turn away. Where are you going? To cooperate. Vincent. He covered her hand with his. You made sure the truth could not be buried. Now I have to decide what kind of man stands in front of it. Minutes later, Abigail watched from the mezzanine as Vincent walked downstairs alone, past rows of silent casino tables, toward the investigators waiting beneath the lobby lights. He never looked back. She knew he had chosen correctly. She just did not know what that choice would cost him. Several months later, the first warm day of spring reached Chicago, carrying sunlight through the front windows of Abigail Bennett's new bookkeeping office. The place was small, only 2 rooms above a neighborhood bakery, but the brass sign on the door carried her name. She had chosen every chair herself, including one wide enough that nobody ever had to wonder whether they belonged there. The investigations had taken time. Grant Holloway surrendered casino records, testified about the lending network, and accepted responsibility for the contracts he had helped maintain. Martin Vale was charged with financial fraud and unlawful retaliation after investigators traced the false release system back to his operation. Dozens of workers had their debts canceled, and recovered assets were placed into a compensation fund. Caruso Holdings survived, but not in the form Vincent had inherited. He closed divisions tied to the old lending network, transferred legitimate businesses into independent management, and spent months answering questions from attorneys and federal investigators. Abigail followed the news from a distance. She never called him. He never appeared at her door. That distance had been harder than she admitted. Still, she built something of her own. Her office helped hourly workers understand payroll deductions, loan agreements, and employment contracts before signing them. On the wall behind her desk hung a framed copy of Daniel Bennett's final audit page, not because her father had been perfect, but because he had spoken when silence would have been easier. At 4:30 that afternoon, the office bell rang. Abigail looked up from a tax form and froze. Vincent stood in the doorway. No bodyguards. No tailored black suit. He wore dark jeans, a charcoal coat, and the same controlled expression she remembered, though something about him seemed lighter. His tattoos were still visible above his collar and along his hands. In one hand, he carried 2 coffees. In the other, a paper bag. Abigail slowly leaned back in her chair. You know, most people make appointments. I considered it. And you might have said no. So your solution was to ignore the possibility? Vincent placed 1 coffee on her desk. Cream. No sugar. Abigail looked at the cup, then at him. That is dangerously close to bribery. He set down the paper bag. Blueberry muffin. Her mouth betrayed her with a smile. Now it is definitely bribery. Vincent smiled too, and the months between them suddenly felt smaller. The investigation into my companies is finished, he said. The legitimate businesses remain. Everything else is gone. Abigail touched the edge of the coffee cup. How does that feel? He considered the question. Quieter than I expected. Good quiet. I am learning the difference. She looked at him for a long moment. Why are you here, Vincent? His hand rested beside the muffin, close to hers, but not touching. Dinner, if you want. No command. No assumption. Just an invitation waiting for her answer. Abigail felt tears threaten and laughed softly at herself. You came all this way for dinner? And the muffin? Very persuasive. I have improved. She stood, accidentally bumped her knee against the desk, and caught the coffee before it tipped. Vincent reached forward instinctively, then stopped when he saw she had it. Abigail pointed at him. Not one word. I said nothing. Your face did. He failed to hide his grin. She grabbed her coat. At the door, Abigail paused. 7 o'clock? 7. And Vincent? He turned. Abigail held his gaze. This time, nobody wins me. The humor left his face, replaced by something warmer. I know. He opened the door and waited for her to walk through first. Months earlier, men around a poker table had argued about Abigail Bennett as if her value could be measured in dollars, debt, or usefulness. In the end, Vincent Caruso learned what they never had. She had never needed anyone to decide what she was worth. She only needed the freedom to decide where she wanted to go next. And that evening, smiling beside the man who had finally learned to walk with her instead of ahead of her, Abigail chose for herself.